Yeah, fish on.
Float fishing is easily one of the most effective ways to target trout, but there's a big difference between just using a bobber and doing it right. Today we're going deep into the gear and tactics you need to effectively float fish your local lakes. Hey everyone, V here from Dang Nice Catch. If you enjoyed this content, please give me a like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks for watching. First up, gear. For your rod, a medium power is actually the sweet spot. While you can use a lighter rod, a medium rod is stiffer, which can give you a much better hook set. Lighter rods tend to give the fish a little bit more slack, which can cost you the catch. For the reels, stick to standard spinning or bait caster. Why? Because we'll be using bobber stops. These stops wind smoothly onto the spool, whereas they will jam up consistently on spin cast reels. If you're stuck with a spin cast, you'll have to stick to fixed floats. Most setups come pre-spooled with 6-pound mono. This is perfect for stocked trout in the lower mainland. If you're using 6-pound mono, technically you do not need a leader. However, if you're using a heavier mainline, or you just want that extra stealth, tie on a fluorocarbon leader to get greater invisibility underwater. And now, the fun part. Floats. There are many varieties of floats: clip-on floats, slip floats, water bobbers, weighted floats, but today we're gonna stick to slip floats and clip-on floats. Slip floats, or inline floats. These are the most popular. They slide up and down your line, allowing you to fish at any depth using a bobber stop. Clip-on or fixed floats. These clip directly onto your line. These are great for beginners because you don't need that extra tackle, but you are limited to shallow water. To get your bait down, we need weights. In lakes, focus on egg sinkers, split shots, and pencil lead. Don't forget the small stuff. Bobber stops sets your depth, beads protects your knot, and swivels prevents line twist and makes it easier to swap out leaders. Now that we have covered the gear, let's go over the reasons why you suck at float fishing. 99% of the people get this wrong. They fish with underbalanced floats. If too much of your float is above the water, there is too much upward resistance. When a trout nibbles, it feels that tension and lets go before you can set the hook. The less float showing above the water, the less force a fish needs to pull it under. Always use the lightest float you can get away with. On calm days, go tiny. If it's windy or you need to reach the fish further out, use a heavier float. But always keep it balanced with enough weights so it's ready to dive. Now, let me show you how I balance my floats and rig them up. This is how I balance my floats. Here I'm using 6-pound mono. I just get enough line to put it through the bobber. Next, I take a split ring and run that line through that split ring so it catches. Next, I would feed this bobber. This inline bobber says it is 8 grams. I'll show you why in a second. It is very important to balance your own floats. I have an 8-gram pencil lead here. I'm gonna put this on. Okay, next, I would take another split ring and put the line through. So these can't slide off. I would just clip on the excess tag. So to balance another float, or this float or this weight does not match, I would move this line on the bottom, take this off, I would put a 11-gram on here, and then clip it back on. And let's go balance this float. Here is the 8-gram DNE float. It says 8 here. I have an 8-gram weight, and let's see. But look at the resistance it has. Look at that bounce up. Like that is pulling the fish's mouth back, but not enough to set the hook. That's why you always have to balance your floats. A lot of people with floats like this, they're getting nibbles like this. They're letting go. They're letting go. The only time you're getting a big bite is if the fish aggressively snaps at it and pulls it under. But even then, you have milliseconds before they let go. And when you're float fishing, when you're presenting your bait vertically, they aren't really snapping at it or aggressively taking the bait. They're coming in, nibbling at it, swimming by, just sucking it in. So with the same float, I put an 11 gram weight on there. Look at that. It's just under the yellow line. So this is 3 grams heavier. That's 3 grams less resistance the trout needs to take that under. Now, this has a 14 gram on there. When the fish are up close to shore, I would use this overweighted float or weight because it is super sensitive and I can see it clearly. When the fish are further out, ideally I want it right there. So it's as sensitive as possible and more of it is visible to the eye. So this is currently a 14 gram on an 8 gram float. I'm just gently pushing this down. The resistance is really light because there's so much weight on there. It takes less to pull it down. This is where you get your higher hook sets. You get more time to set the hook. Here it says it is 8 grams. So let's test this one out to see if it's at 8 grams. Now let's go test these floats. Okay, let's watch this one. Look at that. It's gone. This is why you have to balance your own floats. If I set this up in the field, I rigged all my bobber stops, all my beads, everything. I go and cast, and this thing sinks down. Guess what? That's another 10 minutes gone. I put on a 5 gram. Now watch that. Look at that. A lot of people have their floats around here, so 5 gram is a little bit underweight. So I think I would like a 6 gram to make the watermark be over here. But if I was casting further out and this thing is really hard to spot, then I'll have to keep this 5 gram weight, or I'll switch to a bigger float or a float with an antenna. So let's see how a 6 gram weight would do on this float. So we have a 6 gram on here now. Let's put it in. Look at that. Perfect. This is what I would like for this float. Even as I'm pushing down, I still can feel the bounce back it gives. So this float is not really ideal. I mean, it works. This float does the job. So after balancing my floats, I like to get a Sharpie and write the weight, the grammage on here, so I know that it's balanced. Now for a fixed float, we do the same thing, but we don't need as much line. Get a split ring, attach this here, and I will clip on my line. Sometimes I like to double loop just in case it still slips. And here we have it. Let's go test this out. I'm sure you can see the water lines here where that red line is. I'm holding on to the float. Now that I let go, so that is a 5 gram weight on this bobber. This offers significantly less resistance when the fish takes it down. You want to come down here. Now look at these two weights. This one has the 5 gram, okay, and this one has a 6 gram. Look at that. One I will use closer to shore. And the other one with the more sticking out, I'll use for a further cast away so I can see it more. Look at that. This gentle push, look how deep that goes down versus this one. I'm pushing it harder actually. You see? So that is another reason why you always need to balance it. Look at this, gentle. That's gonna stay in the fish's mouth a lot longer. I take my time to set that hook. This one, we will swap the weights and see the difference. So initially this had the 6, now this has the 5. This one had the 5, this one had the 6. Now these both are perfectly balanced. I can use a 7 on this one because this one, as you can see before, we used that 6. It's perfect. So I can write 6, 7. And with these antenna ones, I like to go down here. I like to put the extra gram or half gram on there. I'm sure everybody's seen these bobbers. Here's a 6 gram on here, and see. There's a lot of resistance. And then the same one, I put an 11 gram on there. See? These ones aren't the best bobbers. Don't get these, avoid it. You see the difference between, even though it's below the line, it still is really buoyant, more resistant still. That's 11 gram weight. 11 gram. Show you how I'm gonna rig it up. We need soft beads, bobber stops, and an 11 gram weight. So this is how I would rig it up. We have a medium 6/6 telescopic rod on a spin cast reel. This is how I rig up my float setups for safety. So first thing I put is a bobber stop. This sets your depth. So after my first bobber stop, I put a small bead on here. So this bead prevents my bobber stop from trying to squeeze through the float hole, like so. Next, I put another bead and bobber stop. The reason why I do this, so if I ever get a break off, this is not going anywhere. My line snaps off, the float is gonna get stuck here, and I save my float. This bobber stop costs pennies, fraction of pennies. This float is probably $5. Next, I would put my weight on here. Another bobber stop. I don't want to lose that weight because that weight is balanced to this float. I might not have it backup for this float. So I want to preserve this weight as well. Then lastly, you can either put another bead on here, or I would use one of these bobber stops. Most people put a bead. I like this bobber stop because it's rubber and it protects my knot. This isn't going anywhere. So now we have two options. One, this is a 6-pound mono. If you don't want to use a leader, I'll tie the hook onto here. But what I like to use is a swivel and then put a leader on, because I would put a fluorocarbon leader. It's not necessary. I have it, so I'll use it. Fluorocarbon ain't cheap. So this is how I rig up my float fishing setup. I'll put a 2-foot leader on here with a small hook. The nice thing about a leader, it can act as your first defense for when you snag up. The leader line breaks off, you lose a hook. That's your best case scenario from a snag up. And your second defense is this swivel. This breaks off, you lose the swivel and your hook. The next line of defense are these bobber stops, then your weights, then your float. Most of the time, I break off, I lose a swivel, I lose my leader line. Rarely do I lose any floats. Most of the times you see people that with their floats floating by you, doesn't have any backstop. Rig up a worm on here. Do not do this. You can get away with it, but that presentation doesn't look as nice. Think about this. This is a little dinky piece of worm. Get something at least like in this length, hook it up through the body and out the other side, and then push it down the shank. I have 2 floats, 6 and 7. So I am going to use a 6. I'm going to use a 6 gram and tie on a snap swivel. And then I have a leader here, a fluoro. This leader is about 2 feet. My bait would be dangling at 2 feet. So how we set this up is we clip it on. There you go. The downside to this setup is you're fixed at this depth. If I want to change it, the depth, I gotta slide the line down. But you see here that there's too much line. So if I want to cast far, the chances of tangling up are higher. But if it's just a 10, 20 foot cast, this is perfect. And probably the best bet, I would go with this if the trout are close to shore. This is super sensitive, easy to rig up, no extra tackle. Then I take this off. I can use this as a Carolina rig. Just toss it out there. It's very versatile. And this, if you're stuck with a spin cast, I would set up that spin cast this way. Effective float fishing isn't just about watching a bobber. It's about the small adjustments that make your presentation irresistible. If you found these tips helpful, hit the like button, comment below on what your go-to trout bait is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the water.